And so I learned so much. I feel like the second book's going to go way smoother. And I stopped looking at it as a hobby. I was like, I'm called to write this book. I want to encourage young kids to overcome fear, light overcoming darkness, to step into their destiny. Like, I love middle grade, that age range, and just really wanting them to walk in the fullness of who they were created to be. And so I want kids to be encouraged by my book that, you know, there's obstacles, but you can overcome them. So my story is like, I had to overcome those things, and too, like, not let comparison is the dream killer, because you compare yourself. Oh, I'm not as good as that person. Well, that person has been writing for 20 years. Yeah.
Okay, everyone, welcome back to Living the Next Chapter. The joy for me as a podcaster is I get to meet the best people in the entire world. And I'm not exaggerating. These are the best people. And to talk to authors, as a non-author myself, as a host of this podcast, I get to spend time with people who inspire me, and I get to learn from, and we get to the joy of finding our next great book. And today is by no means an exception. We have a great guest. Leah Brown is on the podcast, and we were talking about her book, everything she's doing. We are going to fall in love with a great story and a great storyteller. Leah, welcome to Living the Next Chapter. Glad to have you here.
Wonderful. Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and chat stories and journey and all of the above, right?
It's amazing, right?
It is.
Okay, so what does that feel like for you to be granted the title storyteller? What does that mean to you?
Oh, I love it that I get to share what's going on in my imagination. You know, it's a joy to be able to be like, hey, I have a story. There's something going on. There's conversations in my head. There's creations, like things I've created, and I get to share it with the world because now I'm a storyteller. I'm an author. So it's a joy.
Okay, so if you were to describe your imagination to us and allow us a backstage pass behind the scenes to who you are and how you think, would your imagination be like an amusement park? Bright colors, noise, and fun? Or is it secretive and mysterious? What's your imagination like? What would it be like if we were able to look behind the curtain a little?
Yeah. It's very fantastical, I would say, which, you know, my book is an epic fantasy. So just very like, let's go into the woods and find what's out there. And so I live in Southern Oregon. So nature, you know, has been a huge inspiration. And so it's like, as a kid, I would go out and be like, let's explore. And so my imagination would run wild. Like, what if this tree could talk? What if, you know, this waterfall could go somewhere? In my mind, like a movie screen, would start to create and imagine, and, you know, just like, ooh, what if this? Ooh, what if there's fairies up in this tree? You know, what if there's, you know, creatures in this cave? So it was just, you know, my imagination is just fantastical. And I've had so many influences too, inspirations, like C.S. Lewis and those type.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All right. And okay, so where did the idea for your book come? Where, kind of take us back, rewind a little bit to the early days of writing your book. What was the initial idea? How did it all start?
Yeah. So, like I said, C.S. Lewis was a huge inspiration. And the Chronicles of Narnia. And those were books that I absolutely loved. And I'm like, yes, like I love worlds like that, where it's just, you go and you experience, and there's overcoming fear and finding the light and inspiration to be who you were created to be. So I wanted a book that showed kids overcoming obstacles, going on an adventure and stepping into their destiny. So like, I started to think like, oh, you know, I watch all these movies, Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, you know, all of these like fantastical movies and books, and read these books. And I was like, you know what? I can create a world like this. And, you know, I have really been doing it my whole life. because as a kid, your imagination runs wild and you just start to create. And so really it starts even just at that young age where you're just imagining and you're storytelling as you're playing. And so it's always been with me. And for me, I loved the allegories in C.S. Lewis, the Chronicles of Narnia. And I'm like, how do I want my source of power to be, and I'm a Christian. And I'm like, I want my source of power to be the Holy Spirit. And so an allegory in my book is called the Eliora, and it means God is light in Greek. Nice. And so there's this character where they get their source of power from, and all books have, where they get their source of power from, whether it's a crystal or, Luke Skywalker, the Force, Star Wars, there's always somewhere to pull power from. And I'm like, what if I had a character that represented the Holy Spirit and they received the light and they received the power of this light to step into their destiny and take back their kingdom, which was lost by darkness and a curse. And so my mind just started going wild with this, like, okay, like, a brother and sister and a friend, and they go back to a realm that they didn't know they were from. And they just are delved into this whole nother world. And so that's kind of my imagination, is I would always go to another world. And so like taking ordinary and going to someplace fantastic.
Nice.
Yeah.
Okay, so how many characters originally did you start out with when you started writing, and then kind of how did that grow and how did your world building happen?
Yeah, so I started out with Isabella and Peter, and I wanted them to have a friend go along with them. So then there was their best friend, Sarah, and there are 12, 13, and 14. Peter's the oldest. And so I created this, like tight unit of friendship. And then, they were raised by their grandmother and grandfather, and they were taken from their original kingdom because it had fallen into darkness. And so they had those as almost like their parents, because they were so young when they had to flee. They were 2 and 4. So they didn't even know they were from the other kingdom. And so I put characters in there to support them. So the mother or the grandmother and grandfather. And then there is a character called Gazer, and he is a falcon, and he's actually like can transform into being like a human with wings. So he helps them along the way, but then he gets taken out of the picture because that I don't want him taking over the characters, because he's such a great character. So I kind of move characters in and out. They meet, a fantastical little creature called Grundle, and he's this furry little speedster, very childlike. He's only like 3 feet tall, and he talks. When he talks, he's like, "Me is so happy. Oh, me," he talks really like childlike, but he's one of my favorite characters. Because he's so funny and cute. So he's along the way with them, helping them journey through the darkness. And then I have one other character that goes along the journey. It's Nobby. And he's this little guy, like the size of a doorknob, Nobby. And he can be invisible and teleport, and he can make others invisible. So I have like these other, side characters that support and help the characters move forward. And so it was fun. It was fun creating these characters and like bringing them along the way in their friendship and getting to know each other too, because they didn't know that these creatures even existed because they were so sheltered and protected. And the grandparents didn't want them to know that they were from another world because they were being hunted. And so everything was secret. And then all of a sudden, like, boom, their world gets flipped upside down. You're from another realm. You're a prince and princess, and, you're called to return the light. And so they go through a magic waterfall with a magical key, and they travel through, and the world building was so much fun because it just evolved. I'm a pantser, and so I don't outline anything. I outline a little. I can't say I don't outline anything, but I just have an idea and I'll write it down, and then I'll just write, and then it's like a movie screen in my head. Everything starts to play out like a movie, and I'm just like typing away, like, oh, and then they do this and then they do that, you know? And so it's just like this movie in my head that just keeps playing out, and, you know, conversations with each other. And it's fun. The world building has been so much fun, creating creatures, and you pull from other things too, you know, C.S. Lewis and, you know, talking trees, Lord of the Rings, you know, the trees are alive. And so, yeah, there's so many things that you can pull from, and then you just add your own to it. Like, it starts to come to life in your own words and your own imagination of like, okay, like this is what they're going to do. And these characters and these villains and, you know, all these creatures. So it's been fun.
So somebody that's writing a new author in the early days of that world building exercise, and they're looking for a little bit of direction, some insight from another author. If somebody came up to your author table and you're signing when you're signing your book, and they're like, can you explain how you do your world building? Is there any tips that I can take back to my writing, to what I'm working on? Is there any insight that you would like to share with them?
I would say coming up with your setting. So, you know, like futuristic, is it an epic fantasy? Is it a completely different world? So finding that setting. So mine, you know, it's really important. So mine was in like the dark forest, and they had like a castle and a kingdom. And so just knowing that setting, and then just flowing with that, and just reading other books too. You can pull from other books, and it kind of gets those imagination wheels going where you're like, ooh, I like that idea. Like, ooh, I can tweak that to my story. Or, you know, like, ooh, like, how am I going to do this? And sometimes it just flows as you get your setting and your characters, and you're like, ooh, I want this. And it starts to just come to life as you get that initial setting, an idea of like, okay, I want this to be a magical book. And so there's going to be lots of magic and, you know, interesting characters and interesting places. So you think of like Lord of the Rings and all these places they went with the elves and, you know, all these. So it's, you pull from other areas. You're like, okay, like one of my characters, they're called the tribe of Petra. And this, you know, my imagination just came to life. What if there were these rock people, and they're small, gray looking little elf people with pointy ears, and they have the power to manipulate rock. And so they can travel through rock is one of my characters. And it just evolved. Nice. It was like my characters in my book were up against a mountain, and I'm like, how are they going to get away? You know, like, I'm like, oh, this tribe, there could be a tribe that lives in the mountain, and they can manipulate rock and pull them into the mountain. And so it's like, oh, like all these things start to come to life when you just start with the setting, and then you just start to imagine.
It's like writing with no boundaries, right? There's you can't paint yourself into a corner and then get stuck and go, I can't get out of this.
Right.
You can just turn to the rock, and now there's rock people. That makes sense.
Right? And it does. It just evolves. So it really is just finding that setting and just going and writing and letting your imagination run wild.
Okay, you got to talk about the cover of the book, because you sent over pictures and email.
Yeah.
I see it behind you as recording.
Yeah, I can see it.
What a beautiful front cover. Okay, it's right there. Yes. So talk about the cover. Who helped you with it? Did you do it? And walk us through the cover. I love this.
Yeah. So we found a lady through Fiverr, and she's from Albania, Cindy Bachkoja. And
Good job.
yeah,
Good job.
I was very, I've had to
There you go,
practice.
Cindy. Good job.
But she's an amazing artist. She's a young woman. And yeah, so I sent her, so I kind of did a rough sketch of kind of what I wanted. I wanted the waterfall because that's that's the portal. So you have the portal and like magical and a dragon at the top. And so I gave her kind of like the sketch of like, okay, this is what I want. And then she did an amazing job at creating the characters. And I do have art inside my book too. And she did so amazing. I'll show you a couple pages. It was so fun. And I had never worked with an artist before. And so she was just so helpful. So this is,
wow.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? And that's Gazer and Isabella and Peter. And they're in a scene where, they're realizing they're being attacked by light snatchers. And so she was so good about like, hey, can you tweak this, and can you tweak that? Like the character doesn't quite look right. And because as an author, you know your characters and what they look like. And so for me, I pulled from other sources. I'd get online and pull pictures that, okay, this is how that character looks in my head. And she tweaked her own, it wasn't exactly like the picture I gave her. But it was really close. And so she had fun too, getting to create and see my characters come to life too. That was so fun.
It's got to be rewarding, right?
It was.
To see them come out of the page to you. That's amazing. So do you have an idea of an age range that would love this book? Like who would be the ideal as far as age range? Is there any consideration there?
So I would say, because it's a chapter book, so, advanced kids, it's middle grade, but I've had a lot of people read it, like Chronicles of Narnia, like adults read it. I've had families read it together with their kids, and it's fun to be able to hear the feedback. And they're like, hey, we love your book I love your book as an adult, but I would say like 9 and up. So there is some, scary characters in there. It's good versus evil. So light overcoming darkness. There are some war scenes, but I don't put like graphic detail, Yeah. So kind of like Chronicles of Narnia. If you read that, then this would be similar to the scenes.
Amazing. Okay. So beyond being on a podcast, which we're doing right now, what else are you doing to help promote the book and get the word out about what you've written?
Yeah, so I do marketing on Instagram and Facebook and Amazon, but I've had a lot of success doing markets. So either like I did a Harvest Festival market or Crafters market. For middle grade books, it's getting into what do you call it? The doorkeepers, the gatekeepers and it's the parents. So being able to talk with the parents has helped, because they're the ones that are like, I don't know, like, is this going to be good for my child? And so they like to meet local people too. So being able to say, hey, I'm a local author, I just wrote this book, has helped a lot. So I usually sell out of my books.
Well, that's a good problem to have.
Yes.
It's a great problem to have. Right? The other thing, I know a lot of people that I talk to really do enjoy audiobooks. Is there any idea in the future to maybe do an audio version of the book?
Yes, I really do want to. And one of the reasons is because as a young kid, I struggled with dyslexia. And so I listened to audiobooks all the time. And so that was my one source as someone that struggled with that growing up. It's better now, but I still love listening to audiobooks, because you could be driving and, listening to a story, and it just, your imagination gets to go wild. So yes, that is my next step. I've actually been looking into that and wanting to do audiobook.
Amazing. Yeah. 'Cause I can imagine some kind of special elements behind the voices as well, with the story and
Yeah.
the sound of walking through the forest or the waterfall sound in with the voices would
Yeah.
be just another level, right?
That would.
Because it's so
That'd be
immersive,
awesome.
right?
That would be awesome. Love that.
All right. Well, we'll put a pin in that. I love audiobooks as well because I can do something else
Yeah.
while I'm listening. I can listen and then focus on another task. But I find it so immersive, and if possible, to hear the author's voice as a character or reading the book is nice because you know this inside and out.
Yeah.
Where a hired actor will do a great job, obviously, but there's something special about the author's voice somewhere in the recording, even if you were just the voice of one of the characters.
Yeah.
That would add in just a difference to how it was presented because it's you, right? It's no one can duplicate you. You're the expert on you.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
It's amazing.
That would be fun.
So I get the sense this isn't the only book you're going to write.
Right. So there's a sneak peek in book 1. So at the end of it, I'm planning on doing a trilogy. And so this is the first book of 3. And the second book is called The Forgotten Kingdom. So Chronicles of the Hidden Realms, The Forgotten Kingdom. And so there's a hook in there. I don't want to share too much, but
Nope, you got yeah.
Yeah, so I'm excited. I've already started the world building process of ideas and writing, and I have the first 2 chapters. So my creative space, I need to delve into it and just get going on it. It's been a busy few months, and then like the marketing, and this is the first book, and like getting out there and stuff. So
how long did it take to write this book?
It took a while. There were some struggles along the way. So, believing like, am I really an author? Because I would start it, and then life would happen, or I'd get discouraged. Like, can I, write something so magical? Like, am I really an author? Is this any good? It's those doubts that start to sneak in and really like limit you, and fear. That's one of the main themes in my book is overcoming fear, because it's something that like I've overcome. And I think people in general, it's something that we all like, there's, whether it's fear of heights or fear of, the dark, or just fear of public speaking.
Being on a podcast. Yeah.
Fear of a podcast. Yeah. So like that was huge. So I had to overcome those obstacles. And then too, like I was dyslexic. So like my spelling isn't the greatest, and so like my grammar isn't the greatest. So like overcoming these obstacles, as I was writing, it wasn't perfect, but you can't expect perfection, when you're first starting out. It's a learning process. And every person that has grown through life, you can't expect perfection. You don't expect perfection from a baby when they're first starting out. So it's like, you can't expect that. And so really like I started in 2015 and it just got published this year. But then, so it took me 5 years to finish. And then I started the editing process and the illustration and all those things and the rewrites. I rewrote it like 3 different times. Wow. And so I learned so much. I feel like the second book's going to go way smoother.
Yeah.
And I stopped looking at it as a hobby. I was like, I'm called to write this book. I want to encourage young kids to overcome fear, light overcoming darkness, to step into their destiny. Like I love middle grade, that age range, and just really wanting them to walk in the fullness of who they were created to be. And so I want kids to be encouraged by my book that, there's obstacles, but you can overcome them. So my story is like, I had to overcome those things, and too, like not let comparison is the dream killer, because you compare yourself. Oh, I'm not as good as that person. well, that person has been writing for 20 years. Yeah.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we tend to compare our worst day to somebody's best day. And we're like, oh, they seem to make it so easy. And
right.
But if we compared our worst day to their worst day, we might find some common ground. So
right.
don't be surrounded by people that inspire you to the point where you feel like giving up. I'm a guitar player. And if I hear another guitar player that's amazing, I have two responses. Either go home and practice or give up.
Right.
Because there's no way I'm going to be as good as that person. So I'm not even going to try.
Yeah.
Sell my guitars, get rid of them. My wife would be happy because I have too many guitars. But that's kind of the response. And I'm hoping that authors listening to our podcast, listening to your story go, wow, she's got her book. She's done. Sounds like a lot of work. A, that's going to inspire me to get to work. Or B, it's going to make me go, can I really do this? And I think you're saying you can do this.
Yes.
And, to have the right people in your corner also helps.
It does.
There's going to be people that are listening to this episode who have been in your corner, following your journey, friends, family, relatives that have been there for you. What I love doing is throwing it back to you and giving you the opportunity to acknowledge those people and to give them credit for what they mean to you as an author and as a person. Who has been there for you over the years and through writing this book? Who would you like to kind of to talk about here on the podcast?
Yeah, so many people. My mom was the first inspiration and my grandmother too. And just as they were always encouraging me to imagine, and they were storytellers. And my mom is a storyteller. She hasn't written any books yet, but maybe. But she saw the storyteller in me. At 7 years old, I came home with a picture book that I had drawn, and I told her the story of Mr. and Mrs. Toad, and I went through each page showing her each picture, and she was like, oh, that's so amazing. She's like, maybe someday you'll write a book. And that stuck with me. And I was just like, oh my gosh, like my mother, it makes me tear up, but my mother, saw the storyteller in me, and how that encouraged me, because when you start to overcome these obstacles, it's like, oh, she saw it in me from the beginning that I was called to write a book. And so it was amazing, her encouragement. And then my husband too. My husband, just so much support and in paying for things too, because he helped me pay for the book and just reading my book and encouraging me, and my kids too. My boys, they were the first ones to read my book. I read it to them, but they would laugh and they'd be like, what's coming next, Mom? So when your kids love what you created, it's so amazing. If I can inspire my kids to
great memory for your kids.
Yes.
Right?
Yes. And so inspiring them to create too. And they inspire me. My son, he's already he's 7, one of them. And he already drew a picture book of dragons and is telling me the story. I'm it's the same age I started. So it's fun that he has that in him, and I get to encourage him and support him in that.
So when are we going to get to see Mr. and Mrs. Toad, the book? I want to see it.
Right?
Come on. Book number 4.
Right?
Let's go. Keep going.
Keep going. Kids' books. Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah, definitely. It doesn't stop there. But so amazing. Surrounding myself with people like Angela Hughes, who is another author, Stephanie Cotta, awesome. Ray Wyckoff, all of them have been just huge inspirations of encouraging. Some of them were beta readers, ARC readers, and, just the support that you have just with a community of authors is so amazing. And so they were a huge encouragement to keep going, keep writing, so much good input. So it's important to surround yourself with that community of writers, because it can be a very lonely place when you're just typing away and you're doing your own stuff and your own story. But really having that community is important.
And what's interesting is just like your mom saw it in you when you were young, you see it in your son. You see it in your kids. And that's amazing, because that's a memory now that you get to pay forward. And they're one day, maybe in the future, they'll be on a podcast talking about their mom who read to them their book, their mom's book when they were little, and saw something in them. And they're going to repeat this whole conversation in the future when they're a writer possibly as well. So it's the same thing that happened to you. You're duplicating for your kids. And I think that's one thing that we can all do as parents, as creative people, is to invest in our kids so that they feel creative and they have a space to share their story too. Without limitations, without, it has to be this way and you're doing it wrong and this has the right way. No, just write the story and follow the story. I love that.
It's so true. Like, our breakthroughs become our kids' breakthroughs. Like, they don't have to be limited by the things that we were limited with, because we've overcome them. So it's like, oh, like, we get to encourage them. Like, don't let that limit you. I get to encourage you in that area to just create and not have those limits of fear and those type of things of comparison. Just
Yeah. Any little hidden keys? See what I did there? Hidden keys that are hiding in the story that you kind of baked into the story that you don't have to give them away. I don't want you to give them away, but have you put anything in there to kind of go, oh, wait till you get to chapter 6, because your brain is going to go, where? Because I hid something in there in the story. That seems like fun to me as an author, to bury little things, little treasures in the story. Is there anything that you kind of baked in there as an author?
There are a few things where it's like, where you have something at the beginning and you tie it in at the end. You know, it's like, oh, that's what that is. Oh, that's why they brought that with them. Or that's, or, those twists where you're like, what?
Yeah. You're expecting to go left, but you go right.
Yeah.
Or something is like, oh, that explains. It's so satisfying.
It is.
As a reader to go, oh, that makes sense. Okay, I didn't understand it when I first read it. Yeah. But now that I'm over here in the next chapter, okay, now it all works. I get it now. Yeah. So that's kind of fun to be able to build that as well as part of the world building.
It is. I love it. Yeah. Keep creating that suspense and those hooks and just, an adventure on every page.
Okay, so I'm going to ask you to write a verbal love letter right now. Okay, you ready? A verbal love letter to the reader of your book. From the author to the reader, what is your message of love to your reader? They bought the book. They received it as a gift over the holidays. It's in their hands for the first time. They haven't even opened it yet. They're loving the cover. They're loving everything about it. They're ready to open it for the first time. But before they do, they listen to this podcast and they hear the author talking to them. What is your love message to them as a reader? What do you want them to know?
I would say to my readers, like, let your imagination run wild. Don't let fear limit your imagination and your creativity and your destiny, really, to be who you were fully created to be and to walk in that fullness of, I get emotional, of stepping into the light of, there's so much darkness in the world, but you can carry the light and you can carry love and goodness, and you can be a light to someone that says, I overcame the fear. I overcame the evil, and I brought goodness and love into the world. And so to my readers, as you read the book, really see yourself and relating with the characters and overcoming things. If there's something in your life that is like, oh, this is so hard, really knowing that you're not alone and that there is a light in the world and a goodness, and you just have to let it in. So
amazing. Okay, so we talked about this before we hit record, that I'm going to do this at the end here. But for those that are listening, they want to reach out to you. They want you on their podcast. They want the book. They want to speak to you. there's a reader that loves your book. They don't know where to find you on social media. Where do we go? How do we do that? And after that, I have one more question for you to kind of end off the podcast. But as far as connection and how we do all that, where's the best place to reach out and speak to you directly?
Yes. So I have a website, www.leahannbrown.com. And you can message me on there. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook under @author.leahannbrown. And so those are some of the places. I'm also on TikTok under the same name. So yeah, reach out. I'd love to chat with you. I'd love to encourage you too, especially if you're a writer. So yeah, reach out.
Well, I have to tell you, you've already done that on the podcast. So thank you. Your passion for what you do and who you are and your message is evident in everything you say. So, and how you put yourself forward. So thank you for being so real on my podcast and sharing. Now, my last question for you is, if one of your main characters was able to walk into the room right now and sit down with you on camera, it's just you and them, and it's your podcast now, and you have the opportunity to ask a question of your main characters, one of your characters, that you don't know the answer to yet, without giving away anything in the book. Is there a question you would ask your character that would give you some insight as to this world you built? Something you don't know about your characters that is intriguing to you as an author?
I love my character Gazer. So if he came in, wanting to find out more about his past, because he was a general of the army for the kingdom, and he left all that to protect Isabella and Peter. And so being able to ask him, like who you left behind and, what was that like, leaving all of that to go serve. So, yeah.
Nice. That would be interesting for you to find out.
Yeah, it would be interesting. His backstory more. And yeah.
Am I making your brain spin a little bit?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah. That's good. That's why I'm asking. I love that.
Yeah.
I'm excited to get this book. I know my wife is going to fall in love with this.
No.
I know many people that are going to love this book. So congratulations, first of all. I don't think we do that enough. Congratulations on writing this book.
Thank you.
You have a lot to be proud of. And you need to bask in that a little bit, that you've done it. There's so many people who start or think of starting and never finish. And you've done this. So that's got to feel good.
Yeah.
And the fact that it's opened the door to now more things coming in the future. Can I ask in advance that you would come back?
Yeah.
When you write the next in the series, and we'll kind of keep the conversation going, because I would love to follow your journey as an author as well. And I think the listeners would love to as well.
Yes, definitely. I love this. You're an amazing host. So just your personality. So I'm so thankful, and I appreciate you and just what you're doing for authors and getting the stories out there. It's amazing. Thank you.
And this podcast would not exist without you. So I would be asking questions to no one, and that would make no sense. So you did amazing. And that's what I love about the show, is we get to meet some of the most amazing people around the world and get inspired, A, to write our story, or B, to fall in love with our next book. And you've done both on this episode. So I'm excited to share this out with our community and to follow your journey. And my encouragement to those listening is to when you buy the book in person or online, to leave an amazing review. Okay, like a detailed, amazing review, to let people know. Because as authors, I know that you appreciate hearing back more than just great book, great author. That's nice. But to have something that's some meat to your review does really help, because that really does give us some direction and help encourage us as authors along the journey. So please do that as a reader, as you purchase a book and gift the book this year. There's many people that would love this book, and I would encourage you to support our authors that are on the podcast, because they are outstanding. Leah, thank you so much for making time to do this. I really appreciate you being on the podcast.
Thank you so much. This was so wonderful.
Hey, thanks for checking out the latest episode of Living the Next Chapter. I'm so happy to bring on these amazing authors and to share their stories, but I do have to confess I have a problem. And people who know me best would say, Dave, you have more than one problem. My problem is I have more episodes than I can release to you through my audio host, but I have a solution for you. Oh yes, head over to our YouTube channel, subscribe today to our YouTube channel, and you can get the most recent episode. I'm posting this episode today that I recorded today, and you can get it now on YouTube. Jump the line, move right past that big burly guy at the door. You can get right in and get the most recent episode of Living the Next Chapter on our YouTube channel. Make sure you go there. livingthenextchapter.com has all the information. And again, I want to thank you for making this podcast such a great joy to create. Catch you on the next one.
Are you searching for your next favorite author? Then Book Banter with Diane Burkhart is the podcast for you. We have amazing guests from indie authors to traditionally published authors and every hybrid in between. If you're an author, we have something for you too. Besides being able to be a guest on our show, we also pepper our lineup occasionally with publishing industry professionals like editors, publicists, marketing coaches, and so many more are coming. So be sure to check out Book Banter with Diane Burkhart, Book Talk Podcast, with new episodes dropping every Wednesday. You can find us on the major streaming services or on our own website, burkhartbooks.com/podcast. Be sure to subscribe today so you never miss an episode, because if you love books like we do, you do not want to miss this podcast.